Hey guys, this is a brand new YouTube channel here to make videos on reverse 1999, which, if you don't know, is a 20th century time travel strategic RPG. And with that said, if you haven't played it, I suggest closing the video here and downloading the game. This video will have spoilers for Chapter 9 and Recoleta's character story. I wanted to make a low video on Recoleta for a while now. However, I struggled to select the topic simply because there was so much I felt like I could talk about due to what a dense and brilliantly layered character she is. But I took a step back and considered, what is it that makes me love her above all others? And after considering this question, I came to the conclusion that Recoleta is the epitome of the love of life, of reality. She is a manifestation of the love for the beauty the writers see in this world. And whenever I consider this, I think of a certain line from a light novel series called Kino no Tabi. That's basically its tagline. The world is not beautiful, therefore it is. To me, that is key to the worldview of the writers, and I believe no other character portrays it as strongly as Recollet. And with her, they explore it through several key ways, which I'll be discussing here. So let's go through it section by section, starting with this is the most obvious and direct aspect, as Recoleta does spend a fair amount of her screen time yapping about it. But to discuss this, we need to understand the necessary context here, which is that of the Latin American boom. That was a literary movement of the 60s and 70s when the work of a group of relatively young Latin American novelists became widely circulated in Europe and throughout the world. Influenced by European and North American modernism, but also by the Latin American vanguardia movement, these writers challenged the established conventions of Latin American literature. Their work was experimental and, owing to the political climate of Latin America in the 60s, also very political. The hallmarks of the style were magical realism, which put simply is a literary style that blends a realistic detail and mundane world with surreal, fantastic, or mythical elements, treating the extraordinary as perfectly ordinary, and second, historical fiction, exploring the political and societal past of Latin America. They often touched on the cyclical nature of history to relate it to the present. As a result, we can't really separate this movement from the Cuban Revolution. They were deeply intertwined. And for a while, it was a successful partnership. However, this honeymoon period ended brutally, with incidents such as the Padilla affair, where on March 20, 1971, Alberto Padilla was arrested and jailed for his work Fuera del Juego and was made to release a statement accepting the crime he had been charged with, while also accusing other writers, including his own wife, of those very crimes. And so we then had the post boom period. The visceral realism movement in the Chapter 9 story, which is taken from the story Savage Detectives by Roberto Bellano, which itself is based on the actual infrarealism movement. They disrupted formal poetry readings, took part in the youth resistance, and declared most important thing is not to write poetry, but to live as a poet. We know that in 1975, the original Recoleta, let's say, joined this movement. However, eventually they left for Europe, exiled and disillusioned. However, the legend of resistance continued in this poet's novels. They had written about their past wanderings, about their lifelong journey across Latin America, about the unfinished quest of poets, and the ideals shattered by the violence of reality. The absurd, brave, glorious, and failed poets. And this is effectively what Recoleta is. He is a reflection of this original author, the embodiment of their dream to wander, which still lived on through the book. the self insert, foolishly brave protagonist of the story they wrote, a knight who fights for literature. She serves to represent everything about this period, its glory, its ideals, and its failure. And she loves it all, even though she knows it was inherently doomed, because as she acknowledges in chapter 9,
You're right about literature, Dorside Beggar. It is a dangerous and futile calling, but I still believe in it.
literature will not change the world, but she believes it can, and that makes all the difference. For the love of something, the belief in something, does not have to be contingent on its success or even its very existence. But of course, this raises the question, is the world itself something to love, with all its hardships, especially for someone like Recoleta, a mere fictional character? Which brings us to our next topic. One of the most fun and relatable aspects of Recoleta is her familiarity with the struggles of everyday life. After all, as she says,
I've waitressed at busy restaurants, picked grapes in vineyards, and even woven yarn in a textile factory. Tienes que mantenerte viva si quieres seguir escribiendo poesía, mi amiga.
Recoleta sees reality with unwavering clarity. She has experienced the harshness of life, as is reflected and illustrated even in her outfits, with her I Zero outfit representing the Recoleta in reality, and so her clothes are tattered and frayed at the edges, whereas her Inside Two outfit is more regal, is in pristine condition, and so represents the idealized fictional version. And you've seen that she does not shy away from these experiences, like in her wild innocent interaction with Wharton, where she asks to be found a job there, and when told that she didn't need to work by Wharton, she responds, I understand now, Wharton. You're trying to offer me a stable environment where I can write without worry, aren't you? Indeed, as long as one lives, new and interesting things will always arise. And what's more is the fact that she sees beauty and enjoyment in these frivolous, tedious, everyday moments. Like in her first encounter wash line.
Also, now I have an experience even more noteworthy than spending 2 weeks hiding out in a university bathroom, being carried around in a suitcase.
Or as is more closely illustrated in her character thriller, where even as she works, she can't help but see the beauty, the poetry, even in the tedium of work. Like when sheets that were washed are blown away in the wind, she can't help but be inspired by the sight, even though the reality of it was simply that they'd have to wash the sheets again. And it's not that she's unaware of or unaffected by all this. After all, as we discussed above, Recoleta is in a sense a parallel, a mirror to the situation the writers in the post-boom period were in, their destitution and their struggle, as they fought to maintain their ideals, despite the fact that the very foundation those ideals were built on was falling apart. But even beyond this, there are more specific, immediately relatable difficulties Recleta faces. We see her grapple with her very existence in chapter 9, with the very fact of being alive. But we'll look at that in greater detail in the next section. So, moving on, her character explores her mental struggles in great detail as well. We see how she has numbed herself to her pain. We see how her experiences in the panopticon affected her. We see how her rewriting difficulties affect her. We see how she feels she's lost touch with her inner imagination, the childhood wonder and sense of freedom she feels like she's lost. And we see her anxiety issues as it eats at her, even making her question her decision to toil away in reality. And yet, by the end of her character story, she makes it through, choosing to experience the world she finds beautiful firsthand, to continue the story, her story, to live as a rebellious, nameless writer who scorns fame and disregards all else, living freely and writing self indulgently. In reality, or as she expresses in her poem,
Blessed me, blessed me. my beating heart does drum. The fervent words of visceral realism. Within my chest they thump.
And now, this brings us to the final section, how all of the above enables and sets up the foundation on which Recoleta makes her final, foolish, glorious choice at the climax of chapter 9. And so, we come to the final section. In the climax of chapter 9, Recoleta chooses to be a real person, even as a fictional character. After destroying the book, Recoleta returned to the story, to the fictional world that's a reflection of her inner thoughts, where she has the opportunity to finally complete her story. But she chooses not to, for as she says,
Soy, queridos amigos, he pasado mi vida emprendiendo aventuras tontas y no recompensadas. Así soy yo, ¿verdad?
it is as such a being that she chooses reality, the dream that she as fiction is a reflection of, that she values greatly and chases after desperately, the dream in which her friends exist. She does, of course, love Amalfitano, her true world, the fictional world, but it is, of course, fictional. For as she puts it,
El Fitano es, en efecto, un lugar ideal. Un lugar para vagar, para un viaje corto y para perderse un rato.
this did not change the fact that the reality she sought, while bittersweet, was just as important to her as her fiction. And so she sought to go back to reality, while carrying on the memories of Amalfitano, while in turn being able to return to reality due to the memories of those the story, her story, lived on in. There's another aspect of this as well, connecting the previous two sections, reflecting the clash, the mix between the idealism of the Latin American authors and the reality they faced and lived in. For their idealism itself was built on a love of life and what it could be, even as they also held disappointment in what it was. And ultimately, it is this passion in those who read stories and keep them in their hearts and minds forevermore, and allows for Recoleta to live on. It is all of the above that enables her to say,
Whether real or fictional, corporeal or intangible, I have accepted my existence.
I think there's something beautiful in that. For if even a fictional character can love, see the beauty in, and choose reality, can accept their existence for what it is, why can't we all? That is the hope Recoleta represents, the fulfillment, the joy that one can obtain even amidst all the absurdity and despair of this world we live in. For all its ugliness, or rather in part due to the ugliness, there is beauty to this world. In the world we live in, it is all too easy to despair, to give in, to lose touch with the world and all the things that are worthwhile in it. I myself have stood at the edge of that abyss and considered the jump. And that is exactly why Recoleta is my absolute favorite character in Reverse 1999. That's all for this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments, as well as any thoughts you have on things I could cover in future videos. Thank you.